to know the planet, to know the universe, to find out what makes things work and why things are the way they are through observation, study, and experimentation. We can unleash the power of the universe and make almost anything happen. This is Understanding Science.
On planet Earth, the area around the equator, or the tropics, is usually hot. It's colder around the north and south poles, or the polar zones. And in between the tropics and the polar zones, milder conditions prevail in what are known as the temperate zones. Hi, I'm Dr. Science. Different plants and animals live in each of the Earth's different zones, or ecosystems. And it's very important that we understand our ecosystems so we can keep them healthy for the living things there, including ourselves. Biogeographers are scientists who study where plants and animals live and their distribution on the planet. They study ecology, which tells us about the relationships of plants, animals, and the environments they live in. For example, the types of plants that grow in the area determine what kind of animals live there. The plant life is determined by the climate of that area. Just like we don't have rainforest in the polar zones, there aren't any polar bears in the tropical areas. Each animal has its own living space or habitat. So how did all the living things get to their different ecosystems on Earth? This movement of plants and animals is called dispersal, and there are many ways that they disperse. As Earth passed through time, lands moved and ice ages came and went. On foot, animals moved across natural land bridges. Volcanic islands became homes for lush tropical greens. Then and now, plants and animals move from place to place with a little help from wind, water, other animals, even people. When the New World was discovered, new plants for food were also discovered, like corn and squash. These were taken back to Europe and cultivated there. Dispersals can either be active or passive. A bird flies wherever it wants to. That's active dispersal. When plants and animals are carried by moving wind, water, or other animals, that's passive dispersal. Have you ever been hiking and got seeds stuck on your socks? Coconuts float on the ocean, soon to wash ashore and possibly grow into coconut trees in a new area. Not all dispersals are good for the environment. The Melaleuca tree from Australia was brought into Florida and began taking over the Everglades. Known as the paper tree, the Melaleuca doesn't burn. In the Everglades, naturally occurring fires are essential to the ecosystem for pollination and to fertilize the ground cover. The Melaleuca trees, which don't burn, nearly destroy the Everglades, endangering the lives that exist in this fragile environment. And with all the ways for plants and animals to disperse, they often meet barriers which block all types of dispersal. Even though water is an excellent mode of dispersal for fish, it can also be a barrier to dispersion for some living things. Some of the physical barriers are deep valley, tall mountains, and man-made objects like tall buildings and dams. When a habitat, like the top of a mountain, does not meet the needs of certain plants and animals, it's called an ecological barrier. Many factors determine life in a certain area: moisture, temperature, light, soil conditions, and wind. These factors differ greatly from area to area on Earth, and that's why different plants and animals thrive in different areas. The factors can also decide the size and population of plants and animals living there. Each area is known as a biome, or region of Earth with its own characteristic climates and organism. The plants and animals of each biome are those naturally found in that region. We call this the natural community of the biome. Scientists do not consider humans, their domestic animals, or crops to be part of the natural community. Now, let's take a look at how the limiting factors of different biomes determine which species will live there. Can you think of an environment that is very low in moisture? The desert. Using the factor of moisture to describe this climate, we would say that the desert is very dry. There is less than 25 centimeters of rainfall a year. A desert can be either hot or cold. Plants in the desert include cacti, grasses, shrubs, and other fleshy plants. Some animals that make the desert their home are rodents like the kangaroo rat, snakes, and lizards. The animals and plants living in deserts have adapted to their environment by developing ways of storing water. Plants store water inside thick, fleshy leaves, while desert animals have extra organs for storing the water they get from eating plants and seeds. And no water is lost in their wastes. Another very low moisture area that is also extremely cold is the tundra. On the dry tundra, rain falls only 20 centimeters a year. And the tundra is so cold that the ground, which remains permanently frozen, is called the permafrost. In the summer, only the surface of the permafrost melts, leaving puddles of water. Mosquitoes are attracted to these puddles. And because the tundra has a very short growing season, all the plants there reproduce at the same time, providing seeds and food for animals. Wading birds migrate to the tundra to take advantage of this bounty. Lichens are the most common plant on the tundra and are the favorite of its native caribou. Some of the smaller animals found on the tundra, like lemmings and rodents, grow thick fur and hibernate in the winter. The few animals that do brave the tundra's cold winter are large, like the caribou, muskox, and polar bear, who all grow thick coats of fur and, because of their size and low surface to the volume ratio, can conserve heat in cold environments. Another biome where the temperatures are mild and the rain doesn't fall too much is the grasslands. With only 25 to 75 centimeters of yearly rainfall, fires are widespread in the grassland areas, and very few trees grow there. Grassland animals also eat new tree shoots before they have a chance to grow. The plant life consists of many different kinds of grasses and herbaceous plants. The grasses thrive in these low moisture areas and can withstand trampling from herds of animals. Grass-eating animals that live in this biome include the buffalo, antelope, wolves, and coyotes. The grasslands of North America, and now many African grasslands, have been turned into farmland. So many of the large animals that once populated these areas are no longer to be found here. Another biome with cold temperatures that is very moist is the coniferous forest. On mountains near coastal areas, the coniferous forest gets heavy rainfall, over 50 centimeters annually. A conifer is a tree with small leaves that have a waxy coating to protect from freezing. Coniferous trees include cedar, pine, redwoods, and evergreens. The seeds of conifers are cones. The trees do not drop their leaves, and it's so cold that there is little decaying plant and animal material to fertilize the soil. So these forests have the fewest plant varieties of all forest biomes. In the winter, the coniferous forest is extremely cold. But during the summer, the ground defrosts completely. This leaves some low areas where water collects, creating a taiga. Taiga is a Russian word meaning swamp forest. Many of the animals here are the same as in the tundra, and you'll also find moose, bears, mountain lions, wolves, and birds. One bird of the coniferous forest is the spruce goose, which has adapted to eating the pine needles of the spruce tree and other conifers. A biome with moderate temperatures and high moisture is the deciduous forest. In this moist climate, the summers are warm and the winters are cold. During the winter, many trees here lose their leaves, like elm, oak, and the maple trees. As the decaying leaves enrich the floor of the deciduous forest, they also provide a home to many animals and insects, spiders, and snails. In the spring, before the leaves grow back, many wildflowers create a beautiful carpet on the forest floor. The deciduous forest is also home to the raccoons, squirrels, small birds, and deer. Many of the animals here sleep or hibernate through the forest's cold winter months. Our sixth biome is warm and wet all year long with no changes in the seasons, the tropical rainforest. There's lots of rain here, with over 200 centimeters every year. Found near the equator, the rainforest's tall treetops form a green roof, or canopy. Light reaches the ground only where trees have been destroyed by fires or by man. And plants grow in these sunlit areas of the canopy. Broadleaf evergreens, palms, and tree ferns help make up this biomes plant life. Its climbing vines grow to the tops of the trees and are as thick as your leg. With more than 4,000 species, the rainforest ecosystem has more plants than any other biome. And its animal life is just as varied. Colorful birds, snakes, monkeys, lizards, and bats all live in the canopy of the rainforest's trees. The climate, plants, and animals in a biome give it its own special character. These 6 may be different from where you live. And each biome may have many other smaller environments. There are other biomes. For example, the ocean. You might even have a biome in your house, like a terrarium or a fish tank. In the fish tank, what do we have? Well, fish, for one thing. And to live, fish need oxygen. Since our tank only has plastic plants, we have an aerator to pump oxygen into the tank. The fish don't eat plastic plants, so we also have to feed the fish every day. Some of the food falls to the bottom and can make the tank messy. So we have a scavenger fish that eats what falls to the bottom. The ornaments in the tank make it look nice and also make great hiding places for the fish. All animals need shelter. In the ocean, fish and aquatic animals hide among rocks or bury themselves in the sand to hide from predators. Some animals have natural camouflage. They look like their surroundings, so they can't be seen. A terrarium is a land biome. In it, we find plants of various sizes and shapes. When we planted the terrarium, we added water and placed the dome on top. Can you guess why we don't have water in it now? As the water evaporates and transpires from the plants, it's collected on the top of the dome, just like what happens in our atmosphere. Then the water drips back down onto the plants. The soil in the terrarium contains bacteria and other organisms to help with the decaying process, so decaying leaves nourish the plants here. Now, I'm going to show you how you can set up your own artificial ecosystem. An ecosystem is made up of all the plants and animals in a natural community or biome. With this experiment, we're going to observe various aquatic ecosystems in miniature. In 6 clean, wide-mouthed jars, numbered 1 through 6, put 100 milliliters of pond water. Then add to each jar a water plant, which is our producer, and a snail, which is our consumer. The first control of this experiment is jar 1. Place it in the sunlight. It is our control. Jar 2 we place in the dark. Jar 1 and jar 2 will have no fertilizer added. The other jars are the independent variables, to which we'll add varying degrees of the variable fertilizer. In jar 3, put 1 dose of liquid fertilizer. In jar 4, put a double dose of fertilizer, and 4 doses in jar 5. Put an overdose in the 6th jar, place jars 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the sunlight next to jar 1. It takes 5 days to finish this project. Each day, record your observations or responding variables. We'll show you what happened in our jars at the end of the video. What do you think will happen in each jar? Make a hypothesis, and we'll find out later if you're right. How do plants and animals know when it's time to migrate, lose their leaves, or hibernate? Okay, try this. Place 2 fingers on your pulse, like this, using 2 fingers, but not your thumb. Place them on the underside of your wrist. You should feel the pulse of your heart beating. Now, tap your finger in the air at the same rate as your heartbeat. This is your internal rhythm, and you have no direct control over it. A rhythm works inside our bodies, telling us when it's time to sleep, wake up, even when our hearts should beat. Scientists call the ability of living things to keep this internal rhythm the biological clock. External changes often trigger changes in this rhythm and changes in an organism's behavior. You'll find many birds nesting in the winter dry season of the Florida Everglades. In this area's dry winter season, water recedes into small ponds which become heavily concentrated with fish and make easy fishing for the birds to feed their young. In the deciduous forest, trees depend on the long, cold, and dark winter for survival. When the days grow longer, deciduous trees begin to sprout new leaves. A deciduous tree can't live in a tropical area where there's no winter resting period. Internal rhythms are broken down into 3 categories: daily rhythms, lunar rhythms, and annual rhythms. Can you think of any of your own daily rhythms? If you feel wide awake in the morning and sleepy at night, this is a daily rhythm. Behavior is tied into the 24-hour day-night cycle. Many animals hunt for their food during the day and are called diurnal animals. Others who hunt for food in the night are known as nocturnal animals. The animals' own daily rhythms give them different hunting patterns. Often, diurnal and nocturnal animals live in the same environment without ever interfering with one another. Both the owl and the opossum are nocturnal animals and occupy the same space as diurnal animals that they rarely come in contact with. What do you think lunar rhythms are named for? Lunar refers to the moon, which controls the tides on Earth. Many living organisms are influenced by the high tides. Every 24 hours, there are 2 high tides and 2 low tides. The animals that live along the shore depend upon the tide to rise and fall twice daily. The tide flowing in is filled with particles for clams, barnacles, and oysters to feed on. The moving water helps them to filter out the particles. When the tide goes out, they close their shells and wait for the next tide to come in. The moon also causes a 2-week cycle where the tides gradually increase to the peak high tide, followed by a gradual decrease to peak low tide once a month. The annual rhythm determines the mating season for many animals, when the conditions are just right for the survival of their offspring. Another kind of annual rhythm is the migrating of birds from winter feeding grounds to summer nesting places. Some animals that can't migrate survive hostile winters by hibernating. When an animal hibernates, its bodily functions slow down to almost a stop. But not all hibernation takes place in the winter. The African lungfish hibernates in the hot, dry season, digging its way into the mud to wait for the next wet season. Avoiding the dry season is called estivation. Frogs also hide from the dry season in winter. Estivation and hibernation are examples of annual rhythms. Many annual rhythms are also triggered by the photoperiod, or the amount of light that is available. Now it's time to look at our artificial ecosystems. After 5 days, the water in jars 3, 4, and 5 is greener, which means there was more algae produced and that there was growth. The jar in the dark, jar 2, has no green. or a lack of chlorophyll, so the producers are fading. It is also cloudy from bacteria and gives off a smell of hydrogen sulfide. Yuck. Jar 2, 5, and 6 show the most change. This indicates instability or a lack of balance in these ecosystems. The lack of light in jar 2 and too much fertilizer in jars 5 and 6 have caused these changes. What did you say would happen in your hypothesis? What did you think would happen if you added more algae or more consumers to eat the plants? Do this experiment at home or in the classroom and find out for yourself. The study of Earth's different biomes show us the many ways plants and animals disperse, adapt, and behave. To know how and why living organisms group in certain areas for their survival is to better understand the ecosystems of the planet. I'm Dr. Science. So long.